This is the story of Emily, a mother who is going through a tough time with a husband who neglects her. Em, you okay? Michael's voice pierced the silence of their kitchen. Emily, lost in her thoughts, jolted at the sound, her hand slipping off the knife handle. She managed to keep the blade steady as she sliced through the onion, the smell filling the air. "Yeah," she replied, her voice quivering slightly. "Just thinking." "Well, don't let the onions get to you," he chuckled, planting a kiss on her forehead. His touch was cold, his eyes distant. The kitchen clock ticked away the seconds, each one a painful reminder of the gulf that had grown between them over the years. Jason, Michael's son from his previous marriage, walked in, his eyes lighting up as he saw her. "Hey, Em," he said warmly. The comfort in his voice was a stark contrast to the chill she felt from Michael. Emily forced a smile, feeling the heat rush to her cheeks. It wasn't just his words that had started to affect her. It was the way he looked at her, the way he made her feel seen in a way Michael hadn't in a very long time. She quickly brushed off the thought and turned back to the stove. That night, after Michael had retreated to his office, Emily found refuge in the warmth of the living room. The TV droned in the background, casting a flickering glow over the room. Jason joined her, his presence a silent comfort she hadn't realized she craved. "You know, Em," he began, his voice low, "sometimes I think we're more than just family." Her heart stuttered. The line between right and wrong had never felt so blurred. She knew she had to keep her distance, but the way he looked at her, the way he spoke about his own feelings of abandonment, made it hard to resist the connection that was slowly unfurling between them. Days turned into weeks, and the tension grew. Michael was oblivious, buried in his work, while Jason's glances grew more lingering. Emily felt a mix of guilt and excitement every time they were alone together. It was wrong, she knew, but she couldn't help the way she felt. One evening, as Michael worked late, Jason approached her, his gaze intense. "I can't hide it anymore," he whispered. "I care about you. More than I should." Emily's breath hitched. "Jason, this isn't right." "I know," he said, stepping back. "But I had to tell you. I don't want to lose you." The words hung in the air, heavy and filled with meaning. Emily knew she had to tread carefully, but the warmth in his eyes was intoxicating, and she felt her resolve wavering. The next day, Michael announced a surprise trip for the weekend, leaving Emily and Jason alone together. The house seemed to shrink around them, their every interaction fraught with tension. It was a dance of denial and attraction that neither could ignore. But fate had other plans. Just as Jason leaned in, his hand reaching for hers, the sound of Michael's car pulled into the driveway. Michael's suspicion grew palpable, his glances sharp. Emily felt trapped, her heart torn between the comfort of the familiar and the allure of the forbidden. The dinner table became a battlefield of unspoken words and hidden glances. The breaking point came when Michael confronted them both, his voice filled with anger and hurt. "What's going on here?" he demanded, slamming his fist down. Michael felt his beard start to curl. Jason stepped forward, his voice filled with accusation. "You never cared about her," he said, his gaze never leaving Emily. The room grew cold as Michael's eyes narrowed, his voice cold as steel. "Get out," he said through gritted teeth. "You're not welcome here anymore." With a heavy heart, Jason packed his bags and left, the door slamming shut on their secret. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily knew she had lost more than just her marriage that night. She had lost the illusion of a perfect life. But amidst the ruins, she also found a truth she could no longer deny. Days turned into weeks, and the house felt like a prison. Michael's coldness grew colder, his resentment a thick fog that suffocated any love that once lingered. Emily tried to mend the shredded fabric of their relationship, but the gap was too wide. Every touch from him felt like a lie, every conversation a facade. One evening, she could no longer bear the weight of their shattered lives. Tears streaming down her face, she sat in the quiet of her bedroom, the divorce papers on the bedside table a stark reminder of the choice she had made. It was a decision that had taken her to the brink of despair, but also one that had set her free. Looking back, Emily realized that the love she had for Jason was a mirror reflecting her own loneliness. It was a love born out of pain, a desperate attempt to fill the void that Michael had left behind. But it was also a love that had taught her the value of authenticity and the cost of denial. As she signed her name, she felt a strange sense of peace. The divorce was final, and with it, the chance of rekindling a flame that had long burned out. The house was now just a shell, a reminder of a past she had to leave behind. Emily took a deep breath and stepped into the future, ready to face the consequences of her heart's desires and the lessons that came with them. In the months that followed, she focused on rebuilding her life. She found solace in her work and the quiet companionship of friends who had supported her through the tumultuous months. But Jason's departure had left a gaping wound, one she wasn't sure would ever truly heal. One day, as she was leaving her office, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She almost ignored it, but something compelled her to answer. "Emily," a tentative voice said on the other end. It was Jason. Her heart skipped a beat. "Jason, how are you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've been better," he replied. "But I had to call you. I can't just leave things the way they are." The conversation was awkward, filled with unspoken apologies and the echoes of what could have been. Yet, amidst the discomfort, there was a glimmer of understanding. They had both suffered in their own ways, bound by a connection they hadn't chosen but couldn't ignore. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Emily agreed to meet him, hoping that by facing their past, they could find a way to move forward. They met at a small cafe, a place that held no memories of the house that had become a battleground. The air was tense, but as they talked, the years of pain began to melt away. "I am sorry for everything," Jason said, looking at her with a sincerity that made her heart ache. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," she whispered, "but we can't change what happened." "No," he said, "but we can choose how we move on from it." So, in that moment, Emily knew she had to let go of the guilt that had weighed her down. She had to accept that the love they had shared, however fleeting and ill-advised, was a part of her journey. It was a lesson in the complexities of the human heart, and she was ready to learn from it. They parted ways that evening, not as lovers, but as two people who had once shared something profound. The connection between them had changed, transformed by time and regret. But it remained, a gentle reminder of the fragility of relationships and the strength within themselves to overcome the darkness. Emily walked home, the cool evening air carrying whispers of a new beginning. She knew she had made mistakes, but she also knew that she had grown from them. And as she stepped into the house that was now truly hers, she felt a sense of hope. The future was uncertain, but she was ready to face it, one step at a time, with her heart wide open to the possibilities that lay ahead. The weeks passed in a blur of self-reflection and healing. Emily threw herself into her work, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms and challenges it presented. She started attending a book club, met new people, and even tried her hand at painting, something she had always wanted to do but never had the time for. One evening, as she sat in the quiet of her living room, a canvas and a palette of colors before her, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she allowed herself to hope it was Jason. But when she opened the door, she found a letter instead. It was from him, a heartfelt apology and a promise to respect the boundaries she had set. The letter brought a mix of emotions, sorrow for what might have been, but also a profound sense of relief. She had feared that their meeting would only reopen old wounds, but instead, it had given them both the closure they desperately needed. Days turned into months, and Emily began to date again, cautiously exploring the world of romance with a newfound wisdom. She was more discerning, more guarded, but she didn't let her past dictate her future. And as she moved through the seasons, she found that her heart had healed, not by forgetting, but by embracing the lessons of her tumultuous journey. One spring morning, as the sun streamed through the windows, she received another surprise. A bouquet of her favorite flowers, accompanied by a note from Michael. It was brief, but it contained an apology she had longed to hear. He had found peace in his own way, and he wished her the same. It was a small gesture, but it was enough to mend the fissures that had once threatened to split them apart forever. Life went on, and the house that had once held so much pain became a sanctuary of solace and growth. Emily's heart had been bruised, but it had not been broken beyond repair. She had learned the hard way that love could not be forced into the mold of expectation or obligation, that sometimes the most beautiful connections grew from the most unexpected places. It was sometimes, still could be, but not yet. And as she sat in her garden, surrounded by the blooming life she had cultivated from the ashes of her past, she felt a warmth spread through her chest, not the passionate fire of new love, but the gentle warmth of acceptance and peace. She knew she had made the right choice, not just for herself, but for all three of them. And she was ready, for the first time in years, to truly live again. Months turned into a year, and the house grew quiet, filled with the echoes of her newfound independence. But it was a comforting silence, one that allowed her to hear the whispers of her heart. And in that quiet, she found a strength she didn't know she had. Emily had become the woman she always wanted to be, strong, resilient, and unafraid to face her demons. She had turned her pain into a beacon of hope, lighting her way through the darkness, and as the seasons changed, so too did the color of her world, no longer tinged with guilt and regret, but with the vibrant hues of a life fully lived. One day, as she was walking through the farmer's market, she bumped into an old friend from high school. They talked and laughed, reminiscing about the past. And as they parted ways, her friend handed her a card. "You never know," she said with a wink. It was for a local art class. Emily looked down at the card, feeling a spark of curiosity. It had been so long since she had allowed herself to dream, to hope. And so, with trembling hands, she signed up, ready to explore the canvas of her new life with the same passion she had once reserved for the shadows of her heart. The class was a revelation. The instructor, a kind-hearted man with a gentle touch and a warm smile, coaxed the beauty from her brushes. She found solace in the strokes of color, the way they danced and swirled into life on the canvas. The other students, all searching for their own truths in the art form, became a community she cherished, each one offering a piece of themselves through their work. One evening, as the last light of the setting sun painted the studio in warm hues, she turned to find Jason standing in the doorway. Her heart leaped, a mix of fear and excitement, but his eyes held no malice, only regret and a quiet determination. "I've missed you," he said simply. "I know I can't change the past, but I want to be a part of your future." They talked, their voices hushed in the quiet studio. He had sought help, he told her, had come to terms with his feelings and the boundary he had crossed. He had grown, he said, into a man who knew what it meant to love and respect. And as she listened, Emily felt the last of her anger and fear dissolve. They had both changed, had learned from their mistakes. Emily had and perhaps, just perhaps, they could find a new way to be in each other's lives, a way that didn't involve the destructive dance of desire and duty. In the weeks that followed, they took small steps toward reconciliation. They met for coffee, went for walks, and talked for hours. They spoke of their hopes and fears, the dreams they had held on to, and the ones that had slipped through their fingers. And as they grew closer, not as lovers, but as friends, Emily felt the weight of her past lighten. One evening, as they sat side by side, paintbrushes in hand, creating a shared masterpiece, she turned to him and said, "Thank you." "For what?" he asked, his eyes meeting hers. "For helping me find myself again," she replied. "For showing me that love can grow in the most unexpected places, even when we think the soil has been poisoned." He smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You've done the same for me," he said, laying a gentle hand on her shoulder. And in that moment, as the scent of paint and the sound of their brushes whispered across the canvas, Emily knew that she had found her way back to herself. The love she had once sought in the arms of a forbidden lover had blossomed into a deeper, more profound connection. A love for who she was and for the woman she had become. The art class had become a sanctuary, a place where she could be free, unburdened by the shackles of her past. And as the final bell rang, signaling the end of the session, she felt a bit of sadness, but also a surge of excitement. The next chapter of her life was waiting, a blank page ready to be filled with the colors of her choosing. Section 111. Scene 3, Scenes 14 and 15. Emily and Jason left the studio, the warm light of the setting sun casting long shadows on the ground. They walked slowly, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. And as they reached the end of the block, she paused, looking up at him. "Let's go for a drive," she said impulsively. He nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Where to?" "Anywhere," she replied with a laugh. "Just not home." They drove, the radio playing softly, the windows rolled down, letting the cool evening air wash over them. They talked about art, about life, and about the future. And as the city lights grew distant, the horizon stretching out before them She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. Life flowed on, and Miriam simply felt it. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid, for she knew that whatever twists and turns it held, she would face them with courage, her heart open to the beauty of the journey. And as the stars began to twinkle in the inky sky, she leaned back in her seat, feeling the warmth of Jason's hand on hers, and whispered a silent thank you to the universe for giving her this second chance. The months passed, and their friendship grew stronger. They saw each other often, a bond formed, not by passion, but by understanding and shared experience. And as they drove along the winding road, their hearts beating in time, and so they ran away from home in secrecy.